The sun was setting behind the tall houses, painting the quiet neighborhood with a soft orange glow. The air was still warm from the day, and the sound of kids laughing in the distance mixed with the soft hum of cars passing by. A teenage boy walked along the sidewalk, his basketball shoes tapping against the pavement. His backpack was slung over one shoulder, and a water bottle dangled from the side pocket. He had just finished basketball practice and was heading home, tired but content. He pulled out his phone to text his mother that he'd be home soon. She always worried if he was out too late. He smiled at the thought. She worked long hours and he didn't want to make her worry more than she already did. He typed a quick message, then slipped the phone back into his pocket and kept walking. He didn't notice the police car right away. It was parked a little down the street, lights off, engine running. Two officers sat inside talking quietly. When the boy walked past, one of them turned his head, watching. The car started to move slowly, rolling down the street behind him. At first, he didn't think much of it. Maybe they were just patrolling. But after a few seconds, he could feel their eyes on him. He tried to stay calm. He'd seen enough videos online to know how quickly things could go wrong. His mother had talked to him about it too. How to keep his hands visible, how to stay polite, how not to make sudden movements. He remembered every word she said. But still, the knot in his stomach grew tighter. The police car pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. "Hey you," one of the officers said. "Where are you coming from?" The boy stopped walking. "From the gym," he said, trying to sound respectful. "Basketball practice." "Basketball practice?" the officer repeated. "At this hour?" "Yes, sir." "Practice ends around 7. The other officer leaned forward. "You live around here?" "Yes, sir." "Just a few blocks away?" The first officer nodded slowly. "Mind if we ask what's in your bag?" He hesitated. "Just my uniform and shoes. Can you show us?" the officer asked. The boy swallowed hard. Sure." He started to unzip his backpack, but his hands were shaking a little. The sound of the zipper was louder than it should have been. He could feel the officers watching every move. "Keep your hands where I can see them," one of them said suddenly, stepping out of the car. The boy froze. His heart thumped in his chest. "I'm just getting my uniform," he said softly. "Hands up," the officer repeated. "Now." He lifted his hands slowly, feeling the weight of every second. The street was quiet now. Even the laughter of the kids had faded away. He could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He wished his mom would call. He wished someone would just drive by. The second officer came around the car, his hand resting on his belt. "We got a call about some car break-ins in this area," he said. "You match the description." The boy's voice trembled. "I didn't do anything. I just came from practice. You can call my coach." But they didn't seem to hear him. One of them asked for ID. The boy reached toward his back pocket, and instantly the officer took a step forward. "Hey, what are you reaching for?" "My wallet," the boy said quickly, freezing in place. "You asked for ID." "Slowly," the officer warned. He moved carefully, pulling out his wallet and holding it up. His fingers shook so much he nearly dropped it. A car drove by slowly, and the driver turned to look, sensing something wasn't right. Another neighbor peeked out from their window. The officer took the wallet and glanced at it. "This says you live on Elm Street." "Yes, sir." "Just over there," the boy said, pointing. But his voice cracked. He was scared, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. The officers exchanged a look. "We're going to need you to sit down while we check this out." "Sit down?" "On the ground?" "Yeah, right there." He looked at the concrete. It was cold and dusty, but he did as they said. He sat down slowly, his bag beside him. He could see a few people gathering now, watching from a distance. Someone whispered, and another person took out their phone to record. The boy wanted to disappear. He didn't want to be the next name in someone's video. The officers started talking into their radios, checking something. Time moved painfully slow. The boy kept his hands visible, his breathing shallow. One of the officers walked around him, checking the bag again, even though he'd already told them what was inside. "You sure there's nothing else in here?" "Yes, sir." "Just clothes." The officer unzipped it anyway and pulled out a pair of sneakers and a towel. "You play for a team?" "Yes, the high school team." The officer didn't respond. He just kept searching. Then a woman's voice called out from across the street. "What's going on here?" The officers turned. A middle-aged woman was standing on her porch, holding her phone up like she was recording too. "He's a good kid," she shouted. I see him walk home all the time. Ma'am, please stay back, one of the officers said, but she didn't move. He didn't do anything, she said. I've lived here 20 years. That boy plays for the local school. Leave him alone. The boy felt tears burning in his eyes. He didn't want to cry in front of everyone. He didn't want to look weak. He just wanted to go home. Ma'am, I said, step back, the officer repeated louder this time. But his voice wasn't as firm as before. More people were watching now. A few cars slowed down. Someone shouted, "Why are you bothering that kid?" The boy sat perfectly still. His hands rested on his knees, fingers trembling. The first officer sighed, rubbing his forehead. Let's just wait for confirmation, he muttered. A few long minutes passed. The radio crackled, but the message wasn't clear. The boy's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was his mom. He didn't dare move to answer it. The woman on the porch yelled again, "Call his mother." He's scared out of his mind. The officer looked down at him. You said you texted your mom? Yes, sir. Call her, the officer said. Right now. The boy blinked. Can I move? Yes, but slow. He nodded and reached carefully for his phone. His hands were sweaty. He found his mom's contact and hit the call button. The phone rang once, twice, then she answered. Hey, where are you? She asked, her voice calm but alert. He tried to steady his voice. Mom, the police stopped me. What? Why? I don't know. They said I look like someone. There was a pause. Her tone changed instantly. Where exactly are you? He told her the street name and cross street. She didn't say another word, just stay there. Don't say anything else. Then the call ended. He lowered the phone slowly. The officers were still watching him, still tense. She's on her way, he said softly. Good, one of them replied, though he sounded uneasy now. The minutes stretched again, each one longer than the last. The boy stared at the street, afraid to look anyone in the eye. The crowd had grown larger. More phones were out. A neighbor whispered, his mom's coming. Then from the end of the street, a dark SUV turned the corner, moving quickly but under control. It rolled to a stop right behind the patrol car. The door opened and a tall woman stepped out. Her posture was straight, her face unreadable, but her eyes were sharp. She was wearing a plain black jacket, but something about her presence made the officers stand still. The boy's breath caught in his throat. His mom was here. One of the officers started to speak, but she was already walking toward them, pulling a badge from her pocket. She didn't raise her voice, but every word was clear. What's going on here? That's my son. The officers froze. The badge in her hand reflected in the fading sunlight. It read Federal Bureau of Investigation. The street went completely silent. Even the woman on the porch stopped talking. The boy stared at his mother, half in shock, half in relief. The officer who had been questioning him took a step back. His mother stopped right beside him and crouched down, her voice soft now. Are you okay? He nodded weakly, unable to speak. She turned her head slowly toward the officers. Her expression changed again, calm but cold. You have 2 minutes to explain why you stopped a minor walking home from school. Neither officer spoke. The taller one swallowed hard, his face pale. The other tried to say something about a suspect description, but the words died in his throat. The woman glanced at the open backpack on the ground, then back at them. Does this look like a car thief to you? She asked quietly. No one answered. The boy watched as one of the officers lowered his gaze. The energy in the air shifted. Everyone could feel it. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. Her calm voice carried more power than anything else on that street. For the first time that night, the boy felt safe. The fear that had wrapped around him started to fade. His mom reached out and helped him stand up. Her hand was firm, reassuring. The crowd around them murmured softly. The officers stood frozen, unsure what to do next. The sun had almost disappeared now and the streetlights flickered on. The moment hung in the air like a held breath, the kind that comes right before everything changes. The street was still quiet, but the air felt heavy. The boy stood next to his mother, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. His heart was beating fast, though he tried to look calm. The people who had gathered slowly began to whisper, their eyes moving from the officers to the woman who had just arrived. She still had her badge out and her voice was steady as she spoke. I asked a question, she said again. Why was my son stopped? The taller officer cleared his throat. Ma'am, we were responding to a report of suspicious activity in the area. Your son matched the description we were given. She tilted her head slightly. And what description was that? The officer hesitated. Young male, dark hoodie, carrying a bag. The woman's eyebrow lifted just a little. So half the teenagers in this city? Neither of the officers spoke. The crowd behind them was completely silent now. She kept her eyes on them, her calmness somehow more powerful than anger. Did he resist you? She asked. No, ma'am, the shorter officer said quietly. Did he raise his voice? No. Then why is his bag on the ground?
Why were your hands on your weapons?
The taller officer looked down, suddenly unsure. The woman didn't move closer, but her voice grew sharper. You need to understand something, she said. This isn't just my son. This is a child who was walking home from practice. He followed every rule you claim to teach, and you still treated him like a suspect. A car passed by slowly, and the driver rolled down their window watching. The officers shifted uneasily. One of them tried to explain again, but she raised her hand. Don't, not now, she turned to her son. Pick up your things, sweetheart. Her voice softened instantly when she spoke to him. He nodded, bending down to grab his backpack and phone. His hand still trembled, but she rested a hand on his shoulder to steady him. Then she looked back at the officers. I'm Agent Robinson, she said, showing her ID more clearly. FBI Investigations Division. I know procedure, and I also know abuse of it when I see it. The officers stiffened. She could see the shift in their expressions, shock, embarrassment, and fear all at once. One of them muttered, We didn't know, ma'am. You didn't need to know who I am, she replied. You needed to know who he is, a human being deserving of respect. The woman on the porch called out, Good for you. A few others nodded, murmuring in agreement. The crowd wasn't angry now. They were watching something powerful unfold, a moment of truth that felt long overdue. The shorter officer tried again. We're sorry, ma'am. We didn't mean, she interrupted softly. You didn't mean? Or you didn't think? The officer fell silent. My son was terrified just now, she said, and you're telling me it's a misunderstanding. But that fear doesn't disappear with an apology. It stays. The boy looked down, his eyes burning. He wanted to speak, but the words wouldn't come. His mother put a hand on his back and looked at him gently. It's okay, she whispered. The taller officer finally spoke again. Ma'am, we were just trying to do our job. We had a call. Your job, she said firmly, is to protect, not to assume. And if you can't tell the difference between a criminal and a high school student walking home, then maybe you're in the wrong job. The silence that followed was thick. The sound of the night insects filled the space where words used to be. The crowd had grown larger, but no one dared speak. A few people quietly recorded, their phone lights glowing in the dusk. The taller officer reached for his radio. Dispatch, can we have the watch commander respond to this location? He said into it. Copy that, the voice on the other end replied. The woman folded her arms and looked at her son again. He still looked shaken. His mother lowered her voice. You okay to sit in the car? She asked softly. He nodded and she walked him over to her SUV, opening the back door. He climbed in quietly, staring out the window at the flashing police lights that had just arrived. 2 more patrol cars pulled up and a new officer stepped out, older, gray at the temples, with a calm but cautious expression. Evening, Agent Robinson, he said as soon as he saw her badge. I'm the watch commander. I understand there's been a situation. There has, she replied. Your officers detained my son without reason. I expect a full report filed tonight, and I want access to the body cam footage. The commander nodded quickly. Of course. May I ask if your son is all right? He's shaken but unharmed, she said, her tone softening for just a moment. Then she added, that doesn't excuse the trauma they caused. The commander turned to his officers. Turn over your footage and statements immediately. His tone left no room for argument. They nodded and began fumbling with their gear, their faces pale. The woman crossed her arms again, watching them. She didn't want revenge, she wanted accountability. She had seen too many cases where things went wrong, where parents never got to hug their children again. She knew how quickly moments like this could end in tragedy. Tonight, it almost did. As the officers handed over their footage, the crowd began to disperse. The woman on the porch called out softly, God bless you, ma'am. The agent nodded in thanks. When the commander finished speaking with his team, he walked over to her again. I assure you, Agent Robinson, we'll review everything immediately. You have my word. She looked at him for a long moment. "I hope your words still mean something in this city," she said. He nodded, unable to meet her eyes for long. She turned back toward her car, her heels clicking softly against the pavement. The boy inside looked up as she opened the door. His eyes were red, but he managed a small, grateful smile. "Mom," he whispered. "Thank you." She reached over and brushed his cheek with her thumb. "You don't ever have to thank me for protecting you," she said gently. "That's my job always." As they drove away, the flashing lights faded behind them. The boy leaned back against the seat, staring out the window. His mind replayed every moment, the shouting, the fear, the sound of his mom's voice cutting through it all. For the first time, he realized how close he had been to something that could have gone terribly wrong. After a few minutes of silence, he spoke quietly. "Do you think they'll get in trouble?" His mother kept her eyes on the road. "There will be consequences," she said. "Maybe not everything they deserve, but enough to make them think before they act next time." He nodded slowly. "I didn't do anything wrong, Mom." "I know," she said. "You did everything right. You stayed calm. I'm proud of you." He looked down at his hands. They were still shaking slightly. "It didn't feel like I was doing anything right. I was just scared." "Being scared doesn't mean you failed," she said softly. "It means you're human." He let her words sink in. The car was quiet again, the hum of the tires steady on the road. The city lights flickered past, blurring through the glass. He felt safe now, but a part of him still couldn't shake the memory of those flashing red and blue lights. When they reached home, she parked the car and turned to look at him. "You want to talk about it?" He shook his head. "Not yet. That's okay," she said. "But when you're ready, I'll listen." He managed a small smile. She smiled back, but her eyes showed how deeply this night had affected her too. Inside, she was furious, not just as a mother, but as someone who had spent her career fighting for justice. But right now, she didn't want to think about reports or investigations. She just wanted to make sure her son slept safely in his bed. As the night went on, neither of them spoke much. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. The boy sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone. The videos were already online. He saw himself sitting on the curb with his hands up, his face pale and frightened. Comments filled the screen, some supportive, some angry, some confused. He turned the phone off and stared at the wall. His mother came in, holding a blanket. She draped it over his shoulders and sat beside him. For a moment, they just sat there in silence. "You know," she said finally, "this isn't over. There will be questions, maybe even reporters. But we'll handle it together. You're not alone in this." He nodded, resting his head on her shoulder. For the first time all night, he felt safe enough to close his eyes. Outside, the world kept moving. Sirens in the distance, cars passing by, life carrying on. But inside that quiet living room, one mother and her son held on to each other, both shaken, both strong, both silently promising that next time, things would be different. The next morning, sunlight poured through the curtains, but the boy didn't feel ready to face the day. He had barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flashing red and blue lights, the officers shouting, the fear in his chest. His mom had told him to stay home from school if he needed to, but he didn't want to hide. He just wanted things to feel normal again. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his cereal when his mother walked in. She looked tired too, though she tried not to show it. She poured herself some coffee and sat across from him. "You didn't eat much," she said gently. "I'm not really hungry," he replied. She studied him for a moment, her face soft. "You know, what happened last night wasn't your fault." He nodded but didn't answer. The words were comforting, but the feeling of guilt still clung to him. He kept replaying the moment they told him to sit down, the crowd watching, his hands shaking. It wasn't something that disappeared overnight. His mom reached across the table and rested her hand on his. "There are going to be a lot of people talking about this," she said. "Videos are spreading online and reporters might try to reach out. I just want you to remember, don't let anyone twist the truth. You did nothing wrong." He finally looked up. "Are they in trouble?" She took a slow sip of her coffee. "The investigation started this morning. The department knows who I am and they know this can't be buried." He hesitated. "Does that mean they'll lose their jobs?" She sighed. "That depends. Accountability in law enforcement isn't always simple, but what matters is that this won't be ignored." They'll learn from it even if it's the hard way. He nodded again, though he wasn't sure what that meant. Part of him wanted them to face punishment. Another part just wanted to forget it happened. His mom's phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and frowned. "The station," she said under her breath. "I need to take this." She stepped into the hallway to answer. He could hear bits of her voice, firm, calm, professional. He admired how she could stay composed no matter what. He wished he had that strength. After a few minutes, she came back and sat down again. "They're reviewing the footage today," she said. "And they've asked me to come in to give a statement." He frowned. "Do you have to go?" "Yes," she said. "But you're coming with me." His eyes widened. "What? Why?" "Because it's time they see who you are. Not just a file number, not a suspect, not a clip on a video. You're my son. They need to understand that." He didn't argue. Deep down, he knew she was right. A few hours later, they arrived at the police headquarters. The building looked intimidating, tall, gray, and cold. As they walked through the glass doors, a few officers glanced up, whispering to each other. His mother's badge hung from her neck, and her presence filled the room with quiet authority. A man in a suit met them in the lobby. "Agent Robinson," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming. I'm Captain Edwards. We appreciate your cooperation." She shook his hand firmly. "This isn't about cooperation," she said. "It's about accountability." The captain cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Of course. Let's head to my office." They followed him down a long hallway lined with framed photographs, officers in uniform, award ceremonies, city events. The boy noticed one picture of a community outreach day. He wondered how many of those same officers actually treated people kindly outside of a camera shot. They entered the office, and the captain gestured toward 2 chairs. "Please have a seat." The boy sat quietly while his mother remained standing, arms crossed. "Before we begin," she said, "I want to make sure everything said here is on record." The captain nodded quickly. "Of course. We're recording this meeting." She glanced at her son. "Go ahead and tell them what happened." He swallowed hard. "I was walking home from practice. They followed me in the car. They asked me questions and I answered. But they didn't believe me. They told me to sit on the ground." His voice trembled, but he kept going. They had their hands near their guns. "I thought they were going to." He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. His mother's hand rested gently on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said softly. "You're doing fine." The captain looked uncomfortable. "We reviewed the footage," he said. "It appears the officers acted on a false report. They were on edge because of a recent string of break-ins. And that justifies treating a child like a criminal?" she asked sharply. The captain hesitated. "No, of course not. The department recognizes that mistakes were made." She narrowed her eyes. "Mistakes?" she repeated. "A mistake is spilling coffee on your report. What happened last night was not a mistake, it was a decision. A conscious one." The room went silent for a moment. The boy stared down at his hands, wishing he could disappear. He didn't want to be in this room. He didn't want to relive any of it. His mother's tone softened slightly. "Captain Edwards, I'm not here to ruin careers, but I am here to make sure this never happens again. To any child." The captain nodded, almost relieved. "We'll be implementing additional bias training immediately," he said. "And there will be disciplinary action taken." She didn't reply. She simply gave a slow nod and said, "That's a start." After the meeting, they stepped outside into the bright afternoon light. The boy took a deep breath. It felt good to be out of that building. His mother looked at him. "You handled yourself well," she said. "I'm proud of you." He smiled weakly. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." They started walking toward the car, but before they reached it, a voice called out behind them. A young woman holding a microphone and a camera crew was hurrying toward them. "Agent Robinson!" "Excuse me, can we get a statement?" His mother hesitated. "No comment right now." The reporter stepped closer. "Just a quick word. The video of your son's encounter has gone viral. People are demanding answers. How do you feel about it as both a mother and a federal agent?" She paused. Her son looked up at her nervously. Then she said, "I feel what any mother would feel, fear, anger, relief that my son is still alive. But most of all, I feel a responsibility to make sure this doesn't happen again." The reporter nodded. "Do you plan to take legal action?" She shook her head. "This isn't about revenge. It's about change." Real change. The reporter thanked her and turned back to her crew. The boy watched quietly as they packed up their camera. "They're going to put that on TV?" he asked. "Probably," his mother said. "People need to hear the truth." That night, they sat on the couch again. This time, they weren't afraid of the TV. They turned it on. The local news was covering the story. The reporter's voice filled the room. An incident involving local police and a high school student is sparking conversations about bias and accountability. The camera cut to footage of his mother standing tall in front of the police station. Her words played again: fear, anger, and responsibility. The boy glanced at her. "You really said that like in a movie," he said quietly. She smiled for the first time that day. It wasn't a movie. It was real life. As the segment ended, she turned to him. "You know, this moment is bigger than us," she said. "Sometimes life gives you a voice when you least expect it, and what you do with that voice matters." He thought about that for a long moment. "But I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," she said softly. "You stayed calm when most people couldn't. You survived something no one should have to go through. That takes strength." He didn't answer, but inside he felt a small spark of pride. Later that night, as he lay in bed, he scrolled through his phone again. There were messages from friends, teachers, even strangers. Some said they were proud of him. Others shared their own stories of fear and unfair treatment. For the first time, he didn't feel so alone. He looked at a photo of him and his mom from last year, smiling at his basketball game, arms around each other. It reminded him of what she said earlier. "You don't ever have to thank me for protecting you." He smiled to himself. She was more than just his mom. She was a fighter. And maybe, just maybe, he was too. The house was quiet now. The street outside was calm, no flashing lights, no shouting. Just peace. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Tomorrow would come with new challenges, but tonight he allowed himself to rest. The fear hadn't disappeared completely, but hope had found its way in, softly, steadily, like light returning after a storm. The story didn't fade away like most things on the internet do. Days passed, then weeks, but people were still talking about what had happened. The boy could feel it every time he stepped outside. Some neighbors smiled at him kindly. Others just stared. His friends at school treated him differently too. Some were proud, some were nervous to even talk about it. He tried to act like everything was fine, but it wasn't easy. Every time a police car drove by, his stomach tightened. Every time someone mentioned the video, he wanted to disappear. But his mother reminded him again and again, "Don't let this moment define you. Let it strengthen you." She meant it, but it was hard for him to see it that way. At school one morning, a teacher stopped him after class. "I saw your mother on the news again," she said softly. "She's really brave. You both are." He didn't know how to respond. "Thanks," he muttered, clutching his backpack. She smiled gently. "If you ever need time off or someone to talk to, you can come to me." "I mean that." He nodded, appreciating it, even if he didn't plan to take her up on it. At lunch, a few kids came up to his table. One of them, a quiet boy from his math class, said, "My cousin saw that video. He said it made him think different about things, like about how people are treated." The boy looked up. Yeah, the kid nodded. "He said your mom's speech was real powerful." He showed it to his friends. For the first time in a while, the boy smiled. Maybe something good was coming out of this after all. Meanwhile, his mother was dealing with more pressure than she ever had before. Reporters kept calling. Civil rights groups reached out. Even her superiors at the FBI wanted her to speak at conferences. It was overwhelming, but she stayed focused on what mattered, using the moment to teach, not to divide. One evening, she came home later than usual. The boy was doing homework at the kitchen table when she walked in. She looked exhausted but calm. He glanced up. "Long day?" "You could say that," she said, setting down her bag. "They want me to lead a task force on police community relations." His eyes widened. "Really, like officially?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, it's a big responsibility. They said what happened to us started a conversation that can't stop now. They want to make sure it turns into something real." He leaned back in his chair, thinking. "That's kind of amazing," she smiled faintly. "It is, but it also means I'll be in the public eye even more."
"And that means we both will be." He didn't say anything.
He knew what she meant. More attention. More questions. Maybe even more criticism. Still, he also knew she wasn't the type to back down from doing what's right. Later that week, they attended a community meeting at a local recreation center. The place was packed: parents, teenagers, teachers, even a few police officers. A small stage was set up at the front, and his mother was one of the speakers. He sat near the back, watching her walk up to the microphone. The crowd quieted as she began to speak. "When I got the call that my son was being detained by officers," she began, "I felt two things: fear and disbelief. Fear for his safety, and disbelief that something like this could happen in my own neighborhood. But more than that, I realized something else. I realized how many mothers don't get to arrive in time." The room fell silent. Her voice carried steady, strong, but full of emotion. "I'm not here to attack anyone. I've worked in law enforcement for many years. I know how complex these situations are, but what happened that night shouldn't happen to any child. It's not about blame, it's about awareness, training, and respect. Because behind every badge and behind every person stopped by one, there are human beings, and we forget that far too often." There was a long pause before the crowd began to applaud. Some stood, clapping harder than others. The boy watched, pride swelling in his chest. He had never seen his mother like this before. Not just strong, but inspiring. After the meeting, people surrounded her, shaking her hand, thanking her. A few officers approached too, speaking quietly, apologetically. One of them, a young man who looked nervous, said, "Ma'am, I've been on the force for 3 years. I've seen things I didn't understand before. What you said tonight made me think. I want to do better," she nodded. "That's all anyone can ask. Just keep learning." When they got home that night, the boy asked, "Do you think people will actually change?" She looked thoughtful. "Not overnight. But I believe change starts with moments like this, one heart, one mind at a time." He smiled. "Sounds like something from one of your speeches." She laughed softly. "Maybe, but that doesn't make it less true." In the days that followed, the story continued to spread, not as a scandal anymore, but as a story of hope. People began to share articles about reform, empathy, and family strength. His mother's calm but firm handling of the situation earned her respect from both sides. Still, not everyone agreed. There were online comments, angry, defensive ones. Some people accused her of exaggerating. Others said she only got attention because of her job title. The boy read a few of them before she caught him. "Don't waste your time on that," she said firmly. "You'll always find people who'd rather deny reality than face it. Let them talk. You just keep walking." He nodded and put his phone down. She was right. She usually was. One Friday afternoon, something unexpected happened. The police chief himself came to visit. He arrived in plain clothes, carrying a small folder. His mother invited him inside. The boy stood nearby, listening quietly. "I wanted to apologize in person," the chief said sincerely. "The way your son was treated was unacceptable. We've already started disciplinary reviews, and I've spoken with the officers involved. They understand the seriousness of their actions." His mother listened carefully, then said, "Thank you for coming. I appreciate your honesty. What matters most now is making sure this doesn't happen again to anyone." The chief nodded. "Agreed. We're partnering with local community leaders for workshops and youth programs. And I'd like to invite your son to one of them if he's willing." The boy blinked. "Me?" "Yes," the chief said. "I think your perspective could help others understand what it feels like to be on the other side. Sometimes hearing from someone directly makes a bigger difference than a lecture ever could." The boy hesitated, looking at his mom. She smiled and said, "It's your choice. But I think you'd do great." He thought about it for a moment. Maybe this was a way to turn something painful into something powerful. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll do it," the chief smiled warmly. "Good. I'll make sure it's handled with care." A week later, the boy found himself standing in front of a small group of young officers and recruits at the local training center. His palms were sweaty and his voice shook at first, but as he spoke, he found his rhythm. He told them what it felt like to be stopped, to be treated like a threat for no reason. He didn't yell or accuse. He just spoke honestly. Some of them nodded, others looked uncomfortable, but they were listening. Afterward, a young recruit came up to him. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said. "I joined to help people. I want to make sure I never make someone feel the way you did." He smiled softly. "That means a lot." When he left the building that day, he felt lighter. For the first time, the fear that had clung to him since that night started to fade. Not because the world had changed completely, but because he had. That evening, his mom asked how it went. "It was good," he said. "We talked. They listened. I think it mattered. She nodded proudly. It always matters when you speak from the heart. They sat together in the living room, the TV playing softly in the background. The news showed another story, this time about the new community program being launched in their city. His mom's name was mentioned along with his. He laughed. Guess we're famous now, she chuckled. Fame fades. What lasts is the good you do. He looked at her, realizing how much she had taught him, not just about bravery but about grace, about using pain as a tool for progress. That night, before going to bed, he stood by the window and looked out at the quiet street. The same one where it all began, but now it looked different. The fear that once haunted that memory had been replaced with something else, peace and a quiet sense of purpose. He whispered to himself, almost like a promise, "It's not over. It's just the beginning." The next few weeks felt like a whirlwind for both mother and son. The boy returned to his normal routine at school, but everything had changed. People looked at him differently now, some with admiration, some with curiosity. He could see it in the way teachers paused when he entered the room, in the whispers of students as he walked down the hall, in the occasional nod from people on the street. At first, it was overwhelming. He wasn't used to attention and he didn't know how to handle it. Some days he wanted to hide, others he wanted to shout and tell his story to anyone who would listen. His mother helped him find balance. She reminded him that their story was bigger than them, that it had the power to influence change, and that speaking up could make a difference. One afternoon, she came home from work earlier than usual. She looked tired, but there was a spark in her eyes. "I have news," she said, pouring herself a cup of tea. He leaned against the counter, curious. "What kind of news?" She smiled. "The police department and local schools are launching a community program focused on understanding youth and police interaction. They want us to help guide it." His eyes widened. "Us, like together?" "Yes," she said. "They've seen the impact of your experience and my intervention. They want real voices in this program, not just adults talking at kids, but someone who's lived it." He felt a mix of nervousness and pride. "Me, really?" She nodded. "Yes. You'll help others understand how fear feels, how words and actions can hurt or help. Your perspective matters." Over the next few days, they met with community leaders, educators, and officers to plan the program. The boy sat quietly at first, listening. He observed how adults debated and discussed, how they tried to balance accountability with learning. His mother gave him gentle nudges to speak up, reminding him that his voice was powerful. Finally, he shared his story in a small meeting with a group of teenagers and a few officers. He told them about walking home, the fear he felt when stopped and the relief he felt when his mother arrived. He didn't exaggerate. He just spoke honestly. One officer raised his hand afterward. "I've never thought about it like that," he said quietly. "I didn't realize how our actions could affect someone so deeply." The boy nodded. "It's not always about what you think you're doing. It's about how it feels on the other side." The discussion continued, and slowly the room began to change. Teenagers opened up about their own fears. Officers admitted mistakes, and they all listened. The boy felt something shift inside him. He realized that speaking out could really make a difference. Meanwhile, his mother was navigating her own challenges. The attention from the media didn't stop. She gave interviews, participated in panels, and guided policy discussions, but she never let it distract her from her primary role, being a mother. One evening, after a long day at a conference, she returned home to find her son in the kitchen, reading. He looked up as she entered, eyes tired but focused. "Long day?" he asked. "You could say that," she replied, smiling softly. "But worth it," he nodded. "I spoke in front of the group today." They listened. Her face lit up. "I'm proud of you. That's a big step," he shrugged. "It was scary, but it felt right. Like maybe something good can come out of all this." She nodded. "Exactly. That's why we share our stories. Not for attention, but to create understanding." As weeks turned into months, the community program began to take shape. Workshops, seminars, and youth engagement sessions were organized. The boy participated when he could, sharing his experience and helping others see the world from his perspective. His mother continued her work, balancing her FBI responsibilities with her new role in guiding community reform. One afternoon, as they walked home from a program session, the boy asked, Do you think this will really make a difference?